Warframe, that's the word that's been making waves over the past few months. Upon hearing that name, most gamers I think would react with, oh, Space Ninjas. Yeah, it's Space Ninjas. It's also consistently in the top 10 games on Steam, has the best gaming community I've ever been a part of, AAA quality gameplay without a shadow of a doubt, and stands as the most impressively developed MMO I've ever seen and more than likely ever will. I bet a lot of people didn't know how popular it truly was, and perhaps that's because it's so different, so unique. People compare it to Destiny, but I only think that's because they're both successful sci-fi MMOs with loot elements. The comparison ends there, and nothing replaces it. Warframe is its own beast, and a beast it is. Let's have a quick look into how Warframe operates. You control a Warframe. There's currently 34 to choose from. Each has 4 abilities, lightning fast movement, and the ability to carry a primary, secondary, and melee weapon. But before you get into any of that, you're placed in your base, an orbiter. From here you can customize weapons and frames, build shit, buy shit, breed shit, check shit, and queue up for PvP from the Conclave console or PvE from the Navigator. Every planet and major exoplanet in the solar system is available and covered in missions. You start on Earth, complete the path, and then kill an AI Warframe in a solar rail to progress to the next planet. Missions are almost never scripted. They just throw you down and give you an objective depending on the mission type, those being Capture, which has you chase down a guy, shoot a guy, and then press X on a guy, Exterminate, which has you kill stuff, Spy, which has you run to 3 locations, stealth your way through and hack a console, Defense, which has you defend some things, Mobile Defense, which is just capture and hold the objectives, Rescue, which is escorting some guys, Survival, which is kill lots of shit but sometimes press X on a thing, Hijack, which is stand on a moving thing then get off at 15 seconds, then stand on it again, Excavation, which is defend a thing and occasionally bring a battery to the thing, Sabotage, which is hack a thing then shoot an inanimate object, and finally Assassination, which is a boss fight. You might think I'm being really vague and reductive, but I'm not. At all. Those few phrases define what you'll be doing the entire game, with the only 3 things changing being your reason to be there, which could either be to progress or to farm, both equally likely, the enemy faction, and the tile set, which is effectively the map. The rooms, the caves, the skybox, and so on. But we don't refer to it as a map because those rooms, caves, and openings are assembled procedurally. Those structures are the tiles, and the game organizes them in a new way every time you start up the mission. The system is flawless, and that's without considering the strong design of the tiles themselves. No one mission will feel exactly the same as another, not even if you pick the same blip. It's almost magical just how well it can prevent the repetitive nature of the game from getting to you. It's a genius way of removing that mental map you subconsciously build up when you play any other game. Everything's new, if only slightly, but it's enough to fill your brain. It's enough to keep you playing, and that's just what Warframe's about, keeping you playing. Keeping you addicted. Digital Extremes have managed to craft an MMO in which almost the entirety of the content is generated by algorithms. I've put 100 hours into Warframe, which is relatively nothing despite it being my 3rd most played game on Steam. That alone should tell you just how good Warframe is at holding your attention. And I was just as oblivious to DE's spell as everyone else. They've taken the science of addiction and poured it into every crevice of the MMO form that they could, and where the usual form wouldn't work, they cut out the old and made their own. The missions are just Exhibit A. This game is a museum. Let me take you on a guided tour. Exhibit B, the gameplay. This is addicting for the right reasons. It's fun. The guns all feel great and there's a huge variety to choose from. The movement system is just as good. You're zipping around with this incredible momentum, bullet timing in midair, riding zip lines, dodging and sliding. Like Titanfall, in any jump you can shoot, and while shooting you can perform any jump. This puts a pretty high skill cap on the game, or it would if the enemy factions weren't just different hordes. I'll give them this, there's a very good amount of variation in the things you fight, but their AI just makes almost all of them rush you. And that's no surprise, since Warframe's idea of difficulty is just like every other MMO. Forget a well-designed moveset, just bump up the level and chuck as many enemies at the player as the engine allows. I praise Titanfall 2 for doing the exact same thing, by which I mean having incredibly basic AI. But there, they won't just rush you, they're far more capable and encourage your movement in both the time to kill and the various abilities such as the shields and the ticks. In Warframe, you've got the shieldy Corpus guy, Grineer Maniacs which teleport about, and the Sentients who become resistant to the damage type you're using. This makes the Sentients an infuriating chore to fight, but at least they tried. It's actually only the Maniacs that grant any variety or depth to the combat though. While Warframe does have various shield generators and buff givers that you should prioritize over others, the time to kill on these enemies has to be so low and the speed on your Warframe has to be so high that in practice, the player's response to them will be a quick zip over to their location and a tap of the melee button, if that, maybe 5 inputs at most. Whereas in Titanfall, you'd have to perform a series of hops, wall runs, and slide to get above or behind a shield guy without taking much damage. Warframe seems to sacrifice much of the depth its movement and gunplay might have afforded the player in favour of monotonous hordes. There are in fact only 2 things that bring any level of skill to the combat, and those are modding your weapons, aka altering stats, and Warframe abilities. Starting with the latter. Warframes have 4 abilities and they fit into roles. Healer, support, offense, defense, things like that. Exactly what you'd expect. Some are designed to synergize with other frames, some, like Excalibur, are just as good on their own. It's generally a very good system. Abilities consistently look great, and DE is far better than most devs at balancing, even if they're very far from perfect. 4-person squads and good team play is required for much higher level content like the 2 sucky raids, but unfortunately use of abilities is barely a fraction of what makes a player good. The other 4 parts come down to modding. Like Diablo, certain enemy types have a set chance of dropping loot, except there that would be a new chess piece or a sword. Here, it's a mod. Mods alter stats. You can upgrade them with Endo, which you get from other drops or from dissolving mods you don't want if you're desperate. Most mods have 5 levels. With each one, the mod becomes more potent and takes up another capacity point out of a total of 30, 60 if you've used an Orokin reactor, or any number if you've got an Aura mod. It's very complicated, and so of course we get builds. Crit builds, life drain builds, whatever builds. You need to mod your weapons and frames because if you don't, you will quite literally not be able to do most high level missions. Enemies will one-shot you, you'll do a single HP when you hit them. And so we have Warfarm. The planets and tiny amounts of story are a disguise for the true progression of Warframe. Shoot loads of shit to get shit that makes you better at shooting higher level shit so you can shoot more shit, and it goes on for hours and hours and hours and hours. The gameplay is just exciting enough to stop you from falling asleep when you inevitably end up spending 40 minutes hiding inside a doorway, spamming mouse 1, praying to RN Jesus for the right mod to drop. That is the state of the game at high level, but it doesn't stop there. That wouldn't be enough to keep us all coming back alone. We're only on Exhibit B. Exhibit C is the Foundry. You'll be able to purchase blueprints for the weapons and frames you want from the market, or you could just farm for them. And using those blueprints you can build a genuine article at the Foundry if you have enough resources which drop from enemies and random lockers or crates that you can smash. It's perfectly balanced so that you'll need a truckload of resources to build anything good, but not so much that you won't bother trying. And when you do all of that, you hit build, and 72 hours to completion, 24 hours, 48 hours, 12 hours, whatever. It's the game telling you to come back tomorrow or all of that time you spent will be wasted. Same thing is true for Kubrow breeding. Getting the egg is step 1, then you need another 24 hours to build a power core, then another 48 to actually raise the thing. And shockingly, you can speed it all up for platinum, aka gems. Warframe's free to play, sure, so I'm more than happy for a developer to have microtransactions, but not only did DE go way overboard with the paywalls, they made it tradable. Exhibit D, Platinum. You start off with just enough to give you the impression that you can get it from anywhere other than trading or the website, and the market is specifically designed so that everything good is just out of your reach. Oh, I only need 20 more plat to get that cool gun. I guess I'll just keep playing. But it doesn't matter. In reality, you trade or you pay. But you're not going to trade without knowing the economy, so you go to the website. Oh, it's only £4 for 75 plat, which is beyond a rip-off. If it weren't for the community telling me to just keep on progressing through the planets because eventually something will drop, I would have either cracked or quit. Well, I did what the community said, and sure enough, I got the Dread. I got very lucky, and I never looked back. I love the Dread. It's by far my favourite weapon in the game, but what if you don't get as lucky as I did? What if you never watched iFlynn's beginner's guide that tells you that you can just buy blueprints which makes the grind that much more bearable? Or that you should spend 100% of your free platinum on slots because there's no other way to get them and you literally cannot have more than 2 Warframes at a given time without spending? Yeah, that's not a joke. You can't get over 8 weapons and 2 frames at a time without buying more slots of platinum. I think Warframe is hideously caustic to new players, and I would have made like so many others and simply left if it weren't for the great people playing the game. While I can't exactly write much about the community, it is genuinely incredible. In fact, it might be the best community I've ever seen in a video game. Warframe players are genuinely nice people who'll help you understand things, invite you to their clans, be respectful during trading, respect other people's wishes during missions, and even produce quality memes if you're into that. I congratulate them, not DE for getting me into the progression. But what about them? How do you get platinum at high level when you need to trade for mods and frames to avoid farming for weeks? Well, DE put a lot of effort into making trading accommodating. There's the bazaar where people can offer up their stock, and of course the want to buy, want to sell trading chat. You contact the guy with what you want and you quote a price. They say yes or no. If you don't know the markets, you will get ripped the fuck off. DE thinks using a chat room is an acceptable place to trade shit people bought for real money because it means new players don't have a clue what they're doing. They'll sell for far too low and get ripped off, so people spend far more time waiting for that kind of player to show up. You might think I'm being unreasonable, you might think I'm being unrealistic. You might have far more faith in humanity than I do, but I am 100% certain that DE haven't implemented a logical trading UI like warframemarket.com because they want this to happen. Because it means people will spend far more time trading, and that means people will buy a little more platinum and spend a little more time logged on. Not even Warframe's community could stop a system like this becoming a toxic cesspit. You might not believe me now, but this same effect happens in other games like it. Rocket League, a game with one of the best UIs I've ever seen, mysteriously lacks a proper trading interface, and the exact same effect happens. Every game, someone in chat says, "Wanna trade?" and they're just begging someone to say, "Yeah, I'm new." The stories I could tell you about that game. It's no surprise to me upon reflection that half my time in that game was spent in a party trading with my friends. I wasn't very into it. Honestly, I felt bad for people. The only thing that separates Warframe from Rocket League in that regard is the average age. In Rocket League, people rip off children. In Warframe, you get a far older audience. And because of that, it's nowhere near as bad. After a conversation with a guy who knows a lot about game development, it might not have been DE's intention to do this. Rather, after they realized that they could benefit from its current state, they simply moved on to something else. Having said so much about DE's ability to addict, I don't think it's reasonable to assume that this came from sheer ignorance. DE knows what they're doing. They're damn good at it, as we're about to reinforce. Exhibit E. Timings. In your classic MMO, you'll have dailies, weeklies, and monthlies. Those can be challenges or missions with all sorts of differences. Some may have modifiers, some may have a special challenge activated. Regardless, it's so you keep coming back every day, every week, every month, even if it's just for a few hours so you can get the best loot. Warframe does this in so many more ways than just the Foundry and Incubator, prime among them being the alerts. Every half hour or so, there's a pop-up on screen no matter what you're doing, with a blip specified and a special reward for completion. Those rewards will be credits, maybe some resources, and maybe a mod. Maybe a good mod. So you play them because it's something good for free, and given their frequency, you keep playing them. I've had multiple sessions of me just doing alerts because it's a free Argon crystal or an incredibly important aura mod. In reality, I'm just completing the same algorithmic missions I've already done 100 times before, but I don't care because if I do something else, I would miss out. Alerts only last for an hour at most. It can't quite be framed how effective they are at just keeping you playing. But then there's the void fishers. They pop up every half hour or so, and if you've got a void relic, you should go run one to get some free prime loot. That's yet another thing that has you running through an algorithmic mission, with the only real change being the loot you get at the end. And of course, there are 4 types of relic, but a void fisher might not be open for each one, so that's another thing you need to be aware of. Syndicates seem like a complicated system, but in reality, it's do these 3 dailies or luck into finding a thing to scan, until you have enough standing to unlock a variation of a weapon you could already have, but with a flashy prefix and edited stats. Then there's the weekly Help Clem mission, the weekly Ayatan treasure mission, which you need to be mental not to do, the daily sorties, which might drop the more valuable than gold Riven mods, and the Orokin vaults where you can farm rare corrupted mods. Honestly, I'm not even sure if that's everything, but that's the true extent of Warframe's power to addict. This was partly what I meant when I said Warframe had one of the most impressive developments I've ever seen. I think I gave the impression that these exhibits are criticisms. They aren't. They're impressive, and hopefully they'll be enlightening. This game is free to play, and I'm fully aware that DE need to make their money somehow. The only thing about them that I can criticize is their ethics. Selling plat due to players being in love with the game is one thing. Selling it because they think it's the only way to progress is another. That kind of trading system is not cool. It was borderline stomach-turning in Rocket League. Here, it's not as bad. The alerts may be a good way to progress, but they are simply algorithms with nothing new, which end up accounting for an unsettling amount of playtime. The platinum cost injected into the most ridiculously unnecessary places, like not even letting you use the basic color palette without spending $5 worth of plat. The mission design, especially survival, encourages sitting in rooms hitting mouse 1 for upwards of half a fucking hour at a time, all to get a good drop. Warframe at its worst encourages literally spending portions of your day with your brain on autopilot as you slay through non-content generated by a computer, with just enough random generation to keep your brain tricked into thinking there's something new every mission, because without the reshuffle you'd slip out of your chair and into a coma. That's Warframe at its worst. But at its best, it delivers genuine story, good enemy design to artwork with the fun gameplay that they never use properly, incredible lore, and true expansions to the game's combat mechanics. Sure, you need to have put in 50 hours at the very least to get it and still give the slightest crap about the story after the worst introduction of a sci-fi universe of all time, but there is some real stuff later on, and it is good. I don't think I can get away with saying that about the intro without explaining myself first. This guy called Captain Vor and his Grineer want to find you, a Tenno, or as everyone else calls it, a space ninja. Captain Vor might be the least interesting character of all time, both in personality and in appearance, yet Warframe opens with him. The Lotus wakes you up and runs you through a generic rendition of post-apocalyptic Earth, and then you get to your lander and the game begins. That intro had to hook every person who played it. Without a doubt, the game owes its player retention to the community, not its awful intro, which I'm sure put a lot of people off. Well, it certainly gets better. I'm now going to describe Natah and the Second Dream in full. I highly recommend skipping ahead if that doesn't interest you or you'd like to avoid spoilers. Once you make it to Uranus, you can begin the Natah questline. Yeah, you need to use a wiki or YouTube to find out how to start it, but once you've scanned the randomly appearing 3 squid things, you can begin by doing the same algorithmic missions you've done before, with the only difference being the dialogue. Dialogue is engaging though. It tells the story of an incredibly powerful race called the Sentients showing signs of returning. Those squid boys were of sentient design, and now a guy called Tilregor is trying to drill into an ancient sentient prison to learn their secrets. He gets in, the sentient wakes up, it's very dramatic, and the sentient's dialogue is actually very well written. After a bit more prancing about, you find out that the Lotus is Natah. She used to work with the sentients, but because she couldn't have children, she became the mother of the Tenno. Fair enough. A bit anticlimactic, but it's a good start to the real meat of Warframe's story, the Second Dream. It opens well with the first cinematic the game ever had. It shows the Stalker, the baddest roadman in the Warframe universe, talking to Hunhao, the sentient we freed in Natah. Hunhao is really pissed off at the Tenno for some reason, so he asks the Stalker to go find the reservoir, the source of our power, and destroy it. Meanwhile, the Lotus tells us to go investigate Hunhao by finding out what the Grineer know about him. But what she really means by that is go do a spy mission. And it turns out none of that even matters because Hunhao can mindjack the Lotus to find out what she knows. And the Lotus, being from one of the most powerful races in the universe, makes the genius strategical decision to not at all worry about Hunhao basically owning her mind and just send the Tenno on yet another mission. So it's no surprise when he sets a fucking trap for you at the end, giving him the location of the reservoir. It doesn't help that they tried to deal with the Lotus being compromised by giving control of the mission to Alad 5, the boss we've previously fought. Not only is this attempt at a counter to Hunhao blatantly too late, it's also the worst thing about the mission by far. His voice makes my skull want to shrink, and he literally trolls you with a warmer, colder game at the end whilst you try to find the sentient tech. Anyway, you go to Neptune next, where you'll find a void gate. Apparently, the reservoir is in the void. The sentients can't get in, but the Stalker can. Before you head in though, Hunhao sends a battlist after you. The sentients' gimmick is that they adapt to your damage type, so you can't rely on a single weapon. This would be good if there were any way to control what weapons players use. They might only have a single good weapon, they might have multiple weapons with the same damage types. In fact, I imagine only the minority of players ever got to fight the battlist as it was intended. For everyone else, as soon as you do enough damage with one weapon, you have to whittle him down with your others, which can take an age. Or you could simply stunlock them with Rhino, which makes the fight trivial. Either way, it's incredibly boring and frustrating. But once you've slaved through that, it's time to go to the Void. You screw about for a bit until it finally turns out that the Earth's missing moon was here all along, stored in the Void. The ancient race of Orokin had the seat of their power within the moon, so naturally it's also where the reservoir is. This reveal is actually done surprisingly well, if only for the fact that it looks so cool. You're promptly told that the Stalker is on his way to destroy the moon, so you've got to go save it. The saving the moon drama is very entertaining. You keep pressing on ahead to find the Stalker in a Void control room. He's got a wide moveset that challenges your mastery of the movement system very well. Unfortunately, he's also got the same gimmick as the Sentients, which makes any attempt to fight him entirely pointless. You later hear the disembodied voices of some Orokin who rebelled against the government to keep the Tenno alive. You go to the reservoir, which turns out to be a fancy-looking fountain, and it dumps out a guy. Your Warframe then dies, but it's okay because the guy gives it a hug. Then the Stalker comes along to stab you up, but he hesitates because his hate is weak or something. I like the characterization they try to give to the Stalker, but the whole Warframe collapsing thing doesn't really make much sense, as we'll see later. Hunhao calls the Stalker a pussy and sends a bunch of battlists after you, which you can kill with a cool laser attack. I do think the carrying drags on, but this section is effective since showing the bond between the Warframe and the kid ends up being very important. Back on the ship, you're meant to carry the guy into the rear end, past the mysterious door you would have been wondering about from the start. Apparently, that seat thing will allow the kid to link up properly with the Warframe again. If we didn't actually need the reservoir, then why the fuck didn't we just go and rescue Jumpsuit Joe from the start of the game? I don't know, but you won't have enough time to think about that because the Stalker, whose Warframe's first ability is to appear dramatically on command, comes out of nowhere and tries to steal your lunch money, while you walk over to the somatic link. Instead of actually trying to fight you, he just sits up top spamming an energy wave attack which knocks you away from the link. Your first move after realizing that he teleports whenever you shoot him would be to try and dodge his attacks, right? Well, good luck with that. The only viable way to get past him is to tap fire your laser at his waves to shoot them out of the sky. Of course, you need to luck into figuring that out because the game never even hints that that's the correct solution. After getting to the link 3 times, you get blown up, and then the Stalker decides to grow a pair. Hunhau's connected through Skype via the Stalker's sword, and he calls the frame a metal puppet. At this point, the big "this is what you are" reveal becomes clear. Until now, everyone had assumed the frames were the Tenno. The Stalker stabs up your frame and then chokes the kid out, but somehow your frame unkills itself and pulls the sword apart, severing Hunhau's connection. The Stalker chickens out and the Lotus comes on board in person to pull your hat off. You get to customize your guy in the world's worst customizer, where literally no options make you look like you've not got 3 STDs and a drug addiction unless you spend platinum. After that travesty, you talk to her and she explains your origin. Apparently, you and a bunch of other kids were in space, but then your ship, called the 10-0, got sneezed on by God or something and you got superpowers. Oh yeah, and the reason you're called the Tenno is because 10-0 sounds like Tenno. Anyway, the Orokin experimented on you, and I think we're going to have you killed because you're too dangerous, but then Margulis, one of the disembodied voices we heard earlier, said that's not fair. They killed her, but she managed to save you by creating a system called transference, in which you can channel your powers into a Warframe, and so you became the Tenno, space ninjas, who had 5 schools. You get to pick your focus, which is a bit of a crapshoot without guidance, because the descriptions barely reflect the actual contents of the focus at all. Aside from that though, these focus schools essentially control what abilities and role you'll have when you're playing as Jumpsuit Joe. Yeah, you can do that now. I'll talk about the combat applications later, but for now I'd like to talk about the focus progression. You can only acquire so much focus every day, so how long will it take you to max out all 5 schools? 9 years. That's not even a lie. I have no doubts they'll fix it in the future, and it doesn't matter for now because you can't do anything interesting with it until the next story quest, The War Within. I think it's great that DE added 5 fully developed skill trees into the late game. Problem is, they're entirely unnecessary. Focus isn't really that important late game, not even in sorties. It's still all about the weapons and frames. Plains of Eidolon does give the operator a reason to be, but still that's only one real use. There are the late game sentients too, but again that's only a gimmick. I don't think it's a big blow to the game, but I get the feeling that a lot of work went into them for no reason. The second dream's success rides not off its design because it really wasn't anything to write home about, but instead its answering of questions that we were all subconsciously asking for however many hours we were playing the game before. That door at the back of the ship was glowing the entire time without purpose. What does it do? Where is the Earth's moon? Why are the Tenno called frames? They're us, right? Why can we just swap bodies on command? Really, those questions were implanted in you the moment you started up the game. The very title of the game, Warframe, puts the first seed in your head. And when critics complained about the lack of story, DE knew exactly what to do, exactly what subjects to deal with. Welcome back everyone who skipped ahead. I don't think the second dream is particularly good. I'm sure you could tell that from my description, but I respect it hugely for the reason I just gave. I was as entranced with it as so many others while I played it, so I don't really think my opinion in retrospect matters. It was incredibly successful, not only as the first major story content, but also as the beginning for the genuinely very interesting lore surrounding the game. There's a unique sci-fi universe here under all that dumb plot, and the guys or gals who wrote it absolutely deserve recognition for that. I'm not going to go through The War Within because I don't have the time, but The War Within is not the only other quest worth doing. There are others. They're usually far shorter, but that means they get a lot more freedom. That being go crazy because you aren't wasting much of your player's time if they don't like it. Chains of Harrow is the most recent one, and it really is good. They go for this creepy horror vibe, and surprisingly they pulled it off exceptionally well. With no algorithmic missions, it expands the lore, tells an interesting story with only a few characters and manages successfully to take the game in an entirely new direction. I think it's brilliant that DE did this for a free-to-play game, and I don't think I'd be lying if I said it and some of the other short story quests like the Limbo Theorem are some of the best story content you can get from an MMO. No, that's not a particularly difficult feat to achieve, but DE didn't have to do it, and I really think it adds some true value to the game. Unfortunately, not even it was able to escape from the museum. To get the new Warframe in question, Harrow, you need to farm defection missions, which are hideously boring and practically impossible without a healer frame, but you could just buy them for platinum. It's a kick in the nuts that after such an incredible mission, the reward is only attainable after putting yourself through a fucking psychological trauma. Speaking of quest rewards, I said much earlier that the reward for the War Within is something called a Riven Mod, or as I hate to call it, Exhibit F. These are basically a supermod whose effects come entirely down to RNG. That means you could get something incredible or you could get something shit. It's a gamble. A great big gamble with hundreds of platinum to gain and a damn lot of your time to lose. Because their value comes only partly from their effects, but also their rarity. Let me walk you through the Riven process. You get a Riven from either the end of the War Within or as a drop from a sortie, a daily activity with a 25% chance of dropping a Riven. Since that means the vast majority of Rivens will be from sorties, we'll use those as the example. On average, you'll get a Riven once every 4 days. That's RNG layer 1. Upon acquisition, the only thing you'll be able to tell about your mod is what weapon type it belongs to. Yeah, just like every other mod, Rivens are not universal. If you just wanted a Riven for any of your guns, that's fine, but if you're looking for 1 or 2 guns specifically, that's RNG layer 2. The only way to find out the true nature of the mod is to complete a trial. The contents of the trials is totally random, so that's RNG layer 3, but it's usually something very easy like killing 5 enemies while sliding.
You see that corner over there? You gotta crouch and hold the left stick forward exactly 1/3 of the way as you walk into that corner at an exactly 45-degree angle. You gotta hold that for 10 minutes. If you do it for a second more than that, or mess up the angle, or look down at all, you gotta start over.
After that, you finally get the mod with its weapon, polarity, mastery rank, and stats laid bare. Here we have RNG layers 4, 5, and 6. Not only do you need the weapon for which the Riven mod works for, you also need to have the right polarity free since you'll more than likely already have a fully modded build. And you need to have rolled stats that make it all worthwhile. Some mods are incredible, giving base damage buffs, increases to crit chance and damage, multi-shot, and any of the many status effects. Some mods will give you minus 220% damage, minus 110% projectile speed, minus 90% ammo pool, and all sorts of shit that regardless of the positive buffs are equivalent to shooting your weapon in the knee. Sounds painful. Shooting it in the head is even worse. The RNG was actually so bad for one guy that he got a flat damage nerf and buffs to only stats that his weapon didn't even use in the first place. Not only do you need stats that are good on paper, you also need stats that build on those your weapons actually uses. No point in giving 500% impact to a gun with a base impact of 1. This system is so risky that if you aren't practically salivating over the thought of getting one, it's actually a wiser choice to sell the veiled mod for 50 or so platinum. If not, you could unveil it and get something worth nothing. I don't want to believe that DE did this on purpose so they'd get a more consistent platinum trade, so I'm not going to. But the RNG does not end there. The final RNG layer is 7. If you get a shit mod, you get to re-roll it for a Kuva cost. Kuva is yet another farmable resource. The first roll doesn't cost much, and its success is up to the base chance, plus the RNG buff or nerf you get from each weapon's Riven dispositions. The higher the dispositions, the higher the chance of good stats. Meta weapons have weak dispositions, and bad weapons have high dispositions, so in this there is some level of encouragement to not immediately scrap Rivens for older weapons. But then again, that means it's harder to get good Rivens for good weapons, so their value increases. More value means more desire means more farming, more trading, more playing, and most importantly, more plat. I don't think Rivens were designed specifically to increase plat sales. I think Rivens were designed to make old weapons viable at endgame, because new weapons tend to be far superior to old ones in Warframe. Power creep. In this, they spectacularly failed. But as long as that happy mistake keeps people slave to the RNG, it's probably never going to change. I've heard the argument that increased playtime is obviously going to mean increased plat sales, but if that time is spent screwing about with Rivens, that's not okay. If that playtime is spent profiteering the underdeveloped trading UI, that's not okay. If that time is spent sitting in corners for huge amounts of your day, occasionally pressing a button or two in the hope that a good mod drops, That is absolutely not okay. I think a line has to be drawn, and I think even those who really enjoy the grind would have much rather had their time spent on true content. Every other MMO has done this to an extent, but Warframe's different. It has totally perfected the free-to-play form, and nothing else even comes close. Not in terms of gameplay, not in terms of free-to-play optimization. DE didn't achieve that through luck. This game has gone from a cool ninja shooting game with loot elements to what people call the Destiny killer in what, 4 years? I have never seen a developer change their game so radically and so often in my life. And even now that they've seemingly perfected the systems by which the game operates, they haven't stopped going. Earlier this year, Plains of Eidolon was released. Warframe went open world. Let's find out how it did. Well, it's very pretty, and your movement works very well in the open world. The map's about 5 square kilometers, but traversal is made easy since you can call in your Archwing to fly about. You need to construct the Archwing launcher at the Foundry though, of course, and you had better hope you already have an Archwing if you're relatively new. The main quest here is all about getting a glass Warframe like in Chains of Harrow. It's a pretty cool quest, but the majority of the content is all to do with the planes themselves. You've got bounties, incursions, mining, and the really cool stuff, fishing. The mining and fishing are for resource and reputation farming, but the bounties and the incursions are where the replay value's at. They're like the alerts and void fishers, but perfectly adapted for the open world design. The bounties are a sequence of randomly generated tasks for you to complete, like kill a guy, disrupt a thing, free another guy, and sabotage another thing. With each task you get a reward from a loot pool, much like the void relics, and the loot gets better the more tasks you do until you finish the bounty. Incursions are quicker, snappier versions of the bounties that you do while roaming the plains whenever the Lotus offers. They're simple objectives like kill some Grineer to draw out a big Grineer, defend a point, rescue a guy by killing some guards and hacking his bomb collar, bring a datamass to a console and defend it. You can actually do incursions while in bounties. The difficulty of the bounty decides the difficulty and rewards of the incursion. Once you've done enough bounties and incursions, you'll have enough Ostron standing to buy a fishing spear. That's right. You go up to a lake, ready your spear, and listen out for anything that sounds fishy, like DE's business model. You can use baits to get the coolest fish. The swisher the fish, the more standing you get and the better the resources. Along with fishing, you can also mine for resources and standing in this incredible minigame. The entire progression is based around this standing. With each rank you get more blueprints for the modules in the new weapon crafting system. If that doesn't interest you, then there's nothing else. For experienced Warframe players, the loot's going to interest them. For anyone who's new, there's basically no direction or motivation to do anything whatsoever, though I think both of these issues could be in part remedied with some very basic balancing changes. The reason people make fun of Plains for its fishing is because it's simply the most efficient way of gaining standing, and on top of the optimal standing gain, you also get vital crafting resources from them, including more bait to catch rarer fish, operator items, and the Archwing launcher. Yeah, you need to fish to use your Archwing. Jesus Christ. Compare all of that to doing bounties which don't give you much standing at all and also have more material rewards that are absolutely laughable, such as credit caches which might as well be memes by now. As you can tell, the reward system is totally broken as it stands, and while that can be very easily fixed, it even extends into the quest for the new Warframe. Completing the Gara quest like with Harrow only gets you the blueprint. If you want the real deal, you've got to go farming. Then there's the difficulty. Plains is on an Earth node. You can go there before you've even left the planet, yet if you do, you'll be hideously underleveled and be stomped into the ground. Plains isn't for new players. It's too difficult, has no rewards, and makes no sense whatsoever if you aren't already used to the game's progression conventions. So its early access feels like a lie, and thus its attempt to overtake Destiny 2 in practice was likely nowhere near as successful as it could have been, since that only might have worked on players who already had fairly experienced accounts. The progression might have been botched, but it's not like it can't be handily fixed. Gameplay is far harder to tweak, so Plains had to nail it on release. The more open areas mean nothing for enemies like the Infested, but for ranged enemies like the Grineer, you've got to get used to the larger engagement distances, by which I mean don't bring a close range weapon. Warframe abilities seem to have far less use, since they're all meant for close range engagements, but with things like the shield abilities and larger area wipes, you can still find use for them. You can also use your Archwing abilities in combat, but the Grineer can call in airborne units of their own, or if not that, simply use bitch-seeking missiles to bring you down. The combination of Archwing and ground-based combat is for me the most impressive combat change, and I am glad that we haven't regressed in terms of fun factor or functionality, as I feared screwing with the engagement distances might have done. But of course, DE don't stop there. With the bigger maps, bosses grow too. Specifically, the Eidolons. Yeah, the name of the expansion does actually have meaning. These are the remnants of sentient war machines damaged in battle with the Orokin, so Plains does fit in with the lore and ongoing pseudo-story. In practice, these Eidolons are bosses who only come out at night, and they're proper bosses bosses with multiple stages and strategies. The first of which is to bring down their shields by using your operator. This is where the focus system comes into its own. Well, sort of. The focus school you picked doesn't really come into play too much. The cool part is how the operator works in the boss fight. As the operator, you deal damage with an amp, one of the 2 craftable weapons. Obviously, you're going to want to bring a good amp, which makes the Eidolons the endgame goal for the expansion. After you take down his shields, you can target any one of his 4 limbs with your normal Warframe. Once he's crippled, he'll do a massive AoE attack which you'll need to avoid with either extreme evasive maneuvers or using the operator's intangibility. He'll then promptly make like a banana and do the split, so you'll need to hunt him down wherever he's spawned, at which point it's rinse and repeat for the other 3 limbs. At the final stage, he's going to start spawning Vomvalists, little sentient guys who try to heal the Eidolon. The best way to take them down is by going to your Warframe, shooting their armor off, and then going to your operator and blowing them away. And once they're dead, it's game over. You win. You can pick up all your loot. But if you want even more loot, you can actually augment the boss fight with these things called Eidolon lures found in Grineer camps. You need to hack the lures, heal them up, which of course necessitates the correct frame, and escort them over to the boss. Lures can stop it from teleporting, and depending on how many are present on death, you can get far more loot. It uses the open world design in the mechanics of the boss and encourages proper team composition and coordination if you want the best loot, which in my eyes is brilliant. And that's on top of the great base mechanics that finally gives a reason for your operator to exist, which without a doubt makes the Eidolon's Warframe's best boss fight. No, that's not a particularly hard feat to achieve, but it's a huge step in the right direction. It's proof that DE know what their combat system is capable of, that it can be used for more than just horde mode. So to conclude, what Plains of Eidolon is Warframe but open world, in every sense of the meaning. The loot, the traversal, the combat, the progression has all been transitioned effectively from a mission menu structure to an open world structure. While it fails in some aspects, it is an excellent update and the best proof we have that DE have the biggest balls of any developer out there. They're willing to take their game in a completely new direction for no other reason than to stick it to Destiny 2. But at this time, the only thing that Plains adds of real value is the map and the concepts of the progression. The incursions, the bounties, the day-night, the Eidolons, all these are valuable ideas. It just doesn't have anything real to drive it at this time. No story and badly balanced progression makes Plains seem kind of pointless. But thankfully that can be rectified, and when it is, this expansion will be yet another triumphant push forward for Digital Extremes. Let's wrap up. Warframe is a masterpiece. It's beating Destiny at its own game for infinitely less money. It had the balls to remake itself time and time again until it found the golden formula, the perfect alchemy of addiction. And even after I've dissected the game and criticized it for 45 minutes, my feelings remain firmly positive. This game is free, and it offers genuine story, addicting gameplay, a genius progression system, an awe-inspiring community, and hours of free content that never seems to stop coming. Warframe is the success of a game that wasn't scared to do what was necessary, to never stop changing until it got it right. It's a lesson, one that Bungie could do with learning right now. While its business model and reliance on farming seems sketchy in places, this game is absolutely worth your time, and even your money if you're fully comfortable with that. Warframe has never been more popular than it is now, and as long as Destiny continues to shoot itself in the foot, as long as Warframe keeps striding forward, it will without a doubt become one of the most popular games around, and it'll deserve it.